Sorry about that. I was just talking to Beth. We were trying to figure out just a little technical thing. I wasn't able to unmute myself for a moment. So thank you, everyone. It's 5:31. I see 4 members of our commission here, so we do have quorum and we can get started. So I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Environmental Commission. It is Tuesday, February 9th, and I am going to go around and just call the names of folks I see who are on the commission. Please just unmute yourself and say here, and then we'll continue. Laura Murphy.
Here.
Kira Pani.
Here.
Pani, sorry. Chelsea too.
Here.
Great. And as other members join, it'll be noted in the minutes. Before we get started, also, I want to quickly just provide some updates on membership because it, although it won't have an impact on quorum, there are some changes that I think are important to share with our group. First, I want to acknowledge that Lori, our commission member, had to step down for personal reasons. So just wanted to remark that I'm really grateful for the time, energy, and effort that she has put into this commission, and wish her all the best. Also wanted to note that we will be getting a new member. Our first student from CSUMB will be joining the commission, Timothy Randazzo, and Timothy is joining us tonight, and when we get to public comment, I'll allow him an opportunity to introduce himself at that point. Is there any changes to the agenda that anybody would like to note from the last 72 hours? Okay, I don't see any from commission members. I have one. I would like to move item 7E on electrification to commission reports. I don't know if I have to vote on this, but if there's any objections, you guys can let me know. Otherwise, we'll just make that switch when the time comes in that agenda. All right, I will open the floor for public comment at this time. Just a reminder to everybody, please provide your first and last name for the record. And you have 3 minutes to speak to the commission on items unrelated to anything on the agenda. So if you would like to speak to something that is on the agenda, there will be time for public comment at that point. So because this is in a Zoom format and not a webinar format, which is what we've used before, if you would like to provide public comment, please use the reaction button if you have it on Zoom and just raise your hand, and then I will acknowledge you. Yes, Timothy.
Hello, commissioners. Thank you for the acknowledgement. My name is Timothy Patrick Grandazzo, and I am an environmental science, technology, and policy student at CSUMB. I am commenting to inform you that I was recently appointed to this commission, which I'm very excited about. I'm attending today's meeting to get a glimpse of the current environmental topics that will be discussed within the city of Seaside. I really look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Timothy. We're happy to have you joining us. Any other public comment at this time? Yes, Jason.
Thank you, Lacey, and sorry, I had a few technical difficulties getting on this. You'd think I'd be more in tune with that, but I just wanted to say hello, and I'm glad you all are still sticking with these meetings. And of course, I can't speak for the council, but I just want to let you know that we have our had a goal setting meeting, and part of that is the climate change policy, and perhaps the environmental committee can look at that as a whole. I'm just making a suggestion here, but it's something I think it would be great for you all to put some eyeballs on it and make suggestions to the council as to how we can deal with climate change in the most effective way. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from December 8th and January 12th?
I'd like to make the motion to approve minutes from those dates.
Chelsea has motioned. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes from both December 8th and January 12th, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Minutes are approved. We'll move on to business items. The first item of business is to review and discuss the city council goals. As Councilmember Campbell mentioned in our public comment period, so this is timely. I am going to share my screen so I can share, or are you sharing, Beth?
You first.
Okay.
First.
Okay, I just have one slide on council goals. So you probably have a little bit more in-depth information, Beth, so I'm just going to share these to give the committee members a general overview. I went through the goals that were included in a council packet a couple of meetings ago. This item ended up getting moved to a later council meeting, and I wasn't able to join the later council meeting, so I don't have an update. But when I went through and reviewed the council goals, these were the ones that I identified as potentially having an impact, large or small, on our commission. So beautification, diversity for commissioners and for commissions, climate action plan, which could also include an electrification ordinance and a carbon footprint action plan. Also, those two were in there as separate items, but they're sort of connected to the climate action plan. Targeted low income recycling, I noted that was for 2022. National monument access, development and planning projects. So that could be anything from Campus Town or the general plan. And there might be others in there as well related to development and planning projects. Those were just the two that stuck out the most for me. So that's a brief introduction. For those of you that aren't aware, these council goals were developed during a retreat session back in December. And I think they're still being reviewed and refined. And I will stop sharing now and give you an opportunity, Beth, to go into a little bit more depth if you have more depth.
So this is what was taken from the city manager's slideshow. This is one of the many slides that were reviewed. It was about, I don't know, 15-minute presentation followed by a pretty lengthy discussion. There's a key at the bottom of this which shows you how at the time of the meeting, although I think this is going to be further refined, things were thought of as being accomplished. White is the first half of 2021, yellow is the second half, and then green takes us into 2022. If you check out some of the items, just scanning through, some of the items in the white are things that are near completion, like Catino Park, some of the street improvements that have been happening in the city for a handful of months now. That might also fall into beautification. That might also be expanded. Yellow is where you see the climate action plan, commission diversity ordinance. We've talked a lot about diversity here with this group and the importance of having that representation on our commission. And then green, targeted low income recycling might be something that we would be more involved with. And the discussion was pretty much that the council, whether or not they were interested in meeting to further develop these goals. Staff wasn't involved in the meeting that council had due to COVID. Last time staff was definitely in the room. So we'll follow this and see where it goes from here.
Thanks, Beth. I'll open it up for comments, just for discussion by council members or commission members.
So I've been,
Oh, good. Good.
sorry. I've been participating in some of the discussions around ADU development and increasing housing. In those conversations, a lot of related topics, environmental associated topics, as I see them, have come up around the idea of parking and availability of parking spaces and infrastructure, and that begging the question around transportation infrastructure and increasing the sustainability and accessibility of transportation within our city, such that parking does not continue to be problematic and such that we see fewer individual vehicles. Another issue I see is the idea of electrification that is tied in with new developments, but we don't see a similar focus on water infrastructure improvement, although water is obviously identified and has very long been an issue. Controlling and securing water supply, having enough water for people to be able to develop, but we're not looking at progressive water reuse in particular. Gray water policies, you talk to city staff, certainly planning department folks about it, and they kind of say, well, if somebody proposes something that seems viable and great, but it seems like if the city could propose in the same way that they've proposed, for example, with ADU development, here's a design that you can use, that we can approve. Proposing something like that for water reuse within the built environment, including gray water, including rainwater catchment, I think would go a very long way to being progressive in water. Also, the idea of using composting toilet systems in ADUs and new developments, another way to really affect change in water use, and also costs and energy use associated with water system treatment. I think that these are all areas that tie between environmental commission and environmental concerns and the city council goals that have been identified.
Thank you, Laura. Kristin, I know you were speaking at the same time. If you want to go next, that's fine.
Sure. Also to chime in, Laura, your comment about gray water, the new city housing manager, Ben Nurse, made a comment at a recent ADU thing about talking to the Monterey Water District about gray water. And so that might be a good next step for this commission to maybe propose something like that. I also wanted to clarify really quick, actually, there was the colors on the list of what was happening when didn't quite match. There was some recent information about a grant for maybe the Upper Broadway beautification, but that seemed to be a 22. And it seemed to be from what I could tell, a white color on Beth's. So just a clarifying question. Are those two different things? This is not related to the grant for Upper Broadway beautification?
I shared it again. I saw it as the first half of 2021. I'm not certain on what that is referring to. There will be an improvement of Upper Broadway, but that's still in the planning stages. So when we open it up for public comment, maybe Councilmember Campbell can inform us on that.
Excellent. Yeah, and then the other thought I had, this is the first time hearing about low-income targeted recycling programs, and I wonder if we can think about that strategically with the green recycling, the basically the compost, commercial compost collection that we've been talking about in the area, and what to do since we don't have a farmer's market for collecting that. So perhaps we could think about how to connect those two, since that's a priority I still would like to see continued.
Thanks, Kristin. Would any other commissioners like to comment on this item?
I did see, and I hear the comments that Laura made about, talking about water infrastructure, in particular gray infrastructure. I'm just wondering, this is more of a question, if there's any conversation of green infrastructure when it comes to water. So just curious if that's been in conversations at all or has been thought about within the city.
Any other comments by commissioners?
Just wanted to second what Kristin brought up about targeted low-income recycling. I'd like to hear a little bit more information on that from anybody who has more information.
I don't have any additional information. But after we hear, do you have some, Beth?
The thing that comes to mind, and I don't recall where I heard this detail, but it was related to the multifamily apartments in the city, and the fact that they don't have probably both the space or those recycling kind of facilities, containers set up there. And that's a huge hole. And especially if you look at our recycling rates compared to everywhere else in this region. I think when we had that presentation, we were at the lowest, and multifamily is a major contributor to that.
Yeah, I remember that presentation as well. Comment I would have in regards to this is these same multifamily unit dwellings, I believe, are going to be one of the first sort of categories impacted by composting requirements. And so, maybe not as early as businesses, but these multi-unit dwellings will be required to compost sort of before, I think, single family dwellings. But so if we're going to be targeting recycling, I think we should also be targeting compost, just in anticipation of additional state requirements that are going to be coming. So looking at it more holistically around waste diversion and as a complete picture, rather than just targeting recycling. Yeah, Jason, I'm going to let you talk. I'm going to, if there's nothing else from other commissioners, I have a few thoughts that I'd like to add, but I want to give the rest of the group an opportunity first. Okay. So my thoughts are really about sort of the bigger picture and the intersections. I noticed a lot when we look at some of those items on there is, if I was in my planning world, I'd look at that and I'd, rather than sort of categorizing it by date, it seems like a lot of those can sort of be lumped into different types of categories, whether that's economic development, sustainability related, youth and community support. And so we're sort of looking at it in those different areas, I think would be really beneficial, primarily for the purpose of communicating and working with commissions like ours. So it's really helpful, I think, for the council to sort of put these in a format that then allows a lot of the groups like the Environmental Commission, the Neighborhood Improvement Program, Parks and Rec, all of these other groups to help understand what the council's priorities are, and that helps guide our work plans. And so that I think is an important piece. And then how to communicate those priorities down to the commission members. I know this came up last year when there was a meeting with the mayor and different city commission chairs and vice chairs around the council priorities. And that was the first time I had sort of heard about the council priorities. And so communicating those down earlier to help inform our work plans would be really beneficial. And that's my comment. So I'll open it up for public comment now. Jason, if you want to start, that would be great. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Lacey, and again, great topics. Environmentalism is obviously important to me as well. So this Thursday, we're having a special meeting to try and hone and figure out how we can understand the priorities of our, not just the priorities, but how the scheduling works out of these goals. Because as the city manager laid it out, there's another matrix out there that some people are having trouble reading, even more trouble than that color scheme there, or similarly. But he did lay it out in terms of what's happening now, what he expects to happen in the next half year and the half year after that, which I actually find quite useful. So you have to balance that with what our priorities might be, because some things are happening already and we should just allow them to continue or help them along. So if you're interested in how we set our priorities, please pay attention on Thursday night. I think it's a 5:30 meeting, but I actually haven't looked at the agenda. And then I'm gonna go to the grant for Upper Broadway. That was, we have not received the grant yet, but it's a grant for safer routes to schools. So it's, hopefully we get it and it'll produce some traffic calming to, efforts and things like that. Potentially 12 million. We've advanced up the chain as a potential grantee. And then green infrastructure, I'm not sure if this is quite the same thing, but we do have to pay attention to how our surface drainage, all of our, whatever we're doing detention basins, things like that, I think are very more forward-looking green infrastructure. I know there's a lot more we can do. Low-income recycling was brought up by Council Member Ariola Garcia, and of course it's very important to us. However, the Waste Management District, since I sit on that board, every year does a study, a breakdown of where the contaminants are coming from and things like that, that help us target the, not only help us target the educational campaign, which needs a lot more oomph behind it, but also makes us realize that when people put the wrong things in the wrong bins, like for example, trash in the recycling, that then needs to be pulled out and charged as trash at a much higher rate. So there's going to be some real consequences, not just for the low-income communities, but for our community as a whole if we don't get our recycling in order. So I just want to be clear on that. And if I can help with any other questions, you should all feel free to reach out to me at any time. And I just want to make myself available to any one of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Campbell, appreciate it. Any other public comment on this item? Okay, there's not an action associated with this item, so we'll continue to sort of stay informed, and as the council priorities evolve, we'll communicate that back to the commission. The next item on the agenda is to review and maybe we'll get to the point of recommending today, maybe not, the draft priority impact plastic pollution prevention policy for council consideration. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can sort of catch ourselves up a little bit on the work that's been done for this. And So we've done a lot of work already, as many of you know. We started this in 2018, putting some sort of parameters around the policy, beginning to develop the policy, doing some research, some outreach. That continued through through 2019, where we were sending letters and having additional outreach. February 2020, sort of that blue box is kind of the most recent update. We were doing the council study session. We made a few revisions at that time based on some of the input that we got from community and business members. And then COVID hit, and we took about an 8-month break right before this was about to go to the first read to council. We came back around and started thinking, okay, maybe, we need to start having a conversation about this policy again in October and fall, and then even into winter. Then in just a couple of weeks ago, I joined the town hall that was hosted by Councilmember Dave Pacheco and shared some updates on the plastic policy process and what the policy contains overall. And then we did some additional stakeholder outreach in 2021, got a group of folks together that I think could be really helpful in implementing the policy. And, if we're going to move this policy forward in our community, we're going to want sort of an all hands on deck approach and really support our community through the transition process. So I'm hoping that we can make some progress in moving this forward at the meeting today. If we need to, we can have a special meeting maybe later in the month if we need to come back to some certain aspects and vote to approve to send to city council at that time. But we'll see how far we get today. My hope is that we can move this forward enough within our commission to send it to council later in the spring. So I'm going to do a refresher of what's all included in the ordinance, since it's been a while since we've all sort of put our heads together around this. So there's a few different sections, and the first is around sort of limiting single-use plastics. It's broad in a sense that it isn't just focused on restaurants and food service providers, although that will be an impacted segment of the business community, but also things like dry cleaning bags. It looks at styrofoam products. So we have the existing ordinance that limits styrofoam takeout, but this would be expanded to include no sale of polystyrene foam products. And that includes anything from styrofoam cups to styrofoam coolers that might be purchased at a grocery store and then brought down to the beach. It talks about balloon limits. The balloon limits, it limits using balloons for advertising special events or promotions. This would probably impact car dealerships the most. It also has language around putting informational posters where balloons are sold to inform them of the impacts of balloons and how to sort of properly dispose of balloons so that they don't end up in our waterways. It also limits balloons at city events, or I'm sorry, at like city locations, city parks. And then it limits plastic water bottles at city events. So it switches from, the single-use plastics to either compostable ware, but an equal part of that is continuing to advocate for reusables. And the value of advocating for reusables, as difficult as that might seem right now in the age of COVID, is that by the more people that are able to bring reusable containers, then that eliminates the need for any type of single-use to-go ware. So it sort of shrinks that pie of demand, and then any savings can go to help pay for if the compostable ware if there's an added cost for the compostable ware. And then it updates our ordinance to also address plastic straws, which is pretty common on the peninsula now. So this section on compliance and support, it's kind of a marked change from what the current code is. The current code sort of establishes, a $100 fine and then a $200 fine. And this doesn't detail any of that. It's more about sort of education and working with businesses who may be struggling to implement the policy. So if there's a violation, then the requirement isn't that they pay a fine, but rather that they would meet with a staff or environmental commission member, and we sort of go over and identify what the challenges might be for them to implement and help identify solutions together. If there continue to be violations, then it would be enforced as a public nuisance. So the question, that we were having with this when we started to bring it back to the forefront of the commission's work and reestablishing our committees is this timely, right? Is this the right thing to do right now when so many businesses are still struggling from the impacts of COVID? And we believe that yes, it is. And I'm speaking on behalf of the subcommittee. And it's for these reasons, right? We've seen up to 250 to 300% increase in single-use to-go-ware. And I'm sure many of us have seen that just as we're walking down the street or when we're ordering our own food to go and we're getting plastic utensils and condiments. State laws will continue to be enforced. So we know that businesses are already going to be facing some pressure to change practices to be more sustainable. And our revisions, our codes are really meant to complement state policies so that they have the benefit of us working to help support them through these changes. In addition, the policy themselves will, if they can meet the policy for Seaside, then they can also meet the policy for the state. The economic outlook is better in general. I mean, if we think back to where we were in March of 2020, it was very much like, it felt like the sky was falling sometimes when we looked at the amount of lost income. And I remember the city manager's manifesto that went out at that time, and they were contemplating, what if the city runs out of money by January of 2021? Luckily we didn't, and we're not in that dire situation that we were. We're expecting to receive more federal support for local communities, and all of that will help our economic recovery. This also just simply modernizes and supports the existing styrofoam policy. So a lot of the requirements that we are proposing are in existence. It just takes it from focusing on styrofoam to focusing on single-use plastics, and plastics continue to be more limited. Obviously, right now we can only recycle 1, 2, and 5, and the majority of what I get, just speaking anecdotally, when I get to go where is not 1, 2, or 5. So a lot of businesses, because these recycling changes are happening, are already out of compliance. So the amount of education and outreach that I would like to do to support this policy will also help to ensure that we're meeting the recycling requirements that are in place as well. So how do we support businesses and our community through this change if we're able to move the policy forward? One thing, these are all things we've discussed. I'm going to share these, and it's open, I think, for the commission to add to this a bit further. Obviously, implementing a long period between the policy passing and the enactment of it, right? So when it will actually go into enforcement. The enhanced customer responsibility, I would sort of combine this for the second bullet and the fourth bullet. So it's really looking at, rather than putting all of the pressure on businesses and all of the responsibility on businesses, is what other stakeholders are part of this game that we can bring to the table to help address the problem of single-use plastics. Obviously, there's a customer responsibility. So I'll share a little bit more in later slides about what we've been thinking about doing to support that customer responsibility. But really, it's about changing the default expectation, right? And that is sometimes just a change. And as more people order to go where and bring them back to their house, all these single-use items become wasteful and unwanted. So it'd be helpful to sort of harness that opportunity and create that shift that can come along with it. I would like to request some money for transitional support for businesses, and model it after an existing policy or an existing program that is underway with the Green Business Network. So the county is implementing the Green Business Network. They're supporting the Green Business Network, and they have $500 grants that are available for businesses that go through the program. And those are expiring in March, I believe. And so the proposal would be to request about $10,000, and a significant portion of that, maybe 80% of that, would go towards $300 to $500 grants that could be given to businesses to support them through this transition. And then those grants would be administered through the Green Business Network. The remaining funds, the remaining 20%, might be things like signage, maybe a billboard signage, articles and advertisements in local media, signage that can be put in key locations at the businesses themselves. The delivery charge, as I mentioned, is sort of a hand in hand with the customer responsibility. And you may have heard of these policies being enacted by neighboring communities or communities throughout the country. PG just passed the most recent one. Delivery service charges, DoorDash, things like that are charging, or companies like that are charging upwards of 30% surcharges to businesses for orders that are received. PG just limited theirs to 15%. And so if we're able to sort of pass a policy and incorporate that or integrate it into this plastics policy, then that savings would also be a benefit that could help sort of soften any sort of blow that businesses might feel. And then the partnerships for implementation. So I've talked to all of these groups that are listed here. They all come with unique sort of perspectives and approaches in terms of supporting plastics reduction, whether it's stormwater and reducing litter and stormwater, or creating posters, or other types of options and education and outreach. So this is this sign, this poster is what I was mentioning for how we might want to communicate and work with businesses even before the policy goes into effect. So imagine walking into a business to pick up a to-go order that will be brought back to your house. And that business has this sign up because they have voluntarily changed their practices to say, you know what, we're only giving these items out if you specifically ask for them. So there might be a sign on the door, there might be a sign at the point of sale, and then there might be another, I think I have one other. Yeah, here's another sign like this in the back of the house, so to speak, where they are actually packaging the bags for to go. So don't automatically put everything in it. It's sort of a reminder just to stop. So the question, I think, before the commission today is sort of multifaceted. So we need to decide if, yes, we want to move this policy forward to the council, and do we want to incorporate any of the additional changes? So we have this sort of base policy that we developed within the last year, And now what are some options that we might be able to bring to the table in light of the new circumstances? Things like incorporating customer responsibility, using your own by default, establishing a cap on food delivery service fees, either temporary or permanent. And I also wanted to acknowledge Mariana has incorporated some additional changes that speak to some of the environmental justice aspects of the policy. So these are the ones that are sort of before us right now. If we want to incorporate these changes, we need to discuss that as a commission. And then what will probably need to happen is that the language will have to be better defined and developed based on the comments that are received from commissioners today, as well as any additional outreach that is done. And then we'll bring the revised language back to a special meeting, vote on that new language. And once that new language is incorporated, then it would go to council. I'm gonna wait on that. I'm gonna pause for a minute and just give myself a moment to breathe and to listen to what thoughts people may have.
I'm excited about a lot of what you were saying. I actually was on the subject of the using your own stuff being a default, and is this the right time? I think this is a great time for kind of a paradigm shift, at least for our locals. I mean, right now, most of our to-go food orders are being consumed at home because people aren't, getting out to go and eating at the office because they're not even at the office necessarily. And we're not going out to meet people because we're not meeting people. So right now, when a huge percentage of our to-go orders are being eaten at home anyways, I think it's a good time to change the expectation of opening your to-go bag and finding a pile of plastic utensils, because now is the time that it's not going to be an issue. So right now, we also have a great time where not only have we been working to teach people about, bringing your own reusable bag and bringing your own reusable, drinking containers. We got so many water bottle refill stations. Well, now everyone's expected to bring your own mask. So the bring your own is really at a peak right now. So in terms of timeliness, I think we should talk about the behavior aspect of this, not just the business and economic aspect. If we are looking at what we want to change, a lot of what we want to change is consumer behavior. Let's put the pressure on the consumers so that this isn't an economic hardship. And I love the idea of just capitalizing on the I'm eating this at home anyways to change our expectations of takeout food. I do also want to just throw out there a couple quick thoughts that I'm not really, I want to hear other people's thoughts on. I like this idea of the grant funds. I think they might encourage early adoption because if you get going rather than dragging your feet, then you might get the transition funds. So that's good. I like the idea of the DoorDash, et cetera, surcharge having a limit. I agree it would help businesses reclaim some cash. I am hesitant on hanging that on our preferred plastics ordinance because I don't know if the DoorDash surcharges are an environmental issue, but I would like it to happen. So those are two things I want to hear from other people on.
I
Thanks,
would agree with Kristin about the surcharge limitation, just making a very clear connection between the policy, the environmental purpose of the policy, and where that really fits. Otherwise, I'm in general basically in favor of all of the proposed changes, definitely incorporating environmental justice concept would be excellent. And I appreciate the extended implementation period and the orientation towards facilitation of adopting these practices as opposed to any kind of punitive approach. I think that's definitely the tone that we want to take with our community. And I don't think there's anything at all wrong with making general, responsibility to be default on the customer in terms of the concept of use your own. All of that I agree with.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Kristin. Any other comments from commissioners about what's been presented so far?
Yes, I have several. Thank you, Lacey, for that great summary. First, I have a question on the timeline extension to compliance. So, if the policy is passed by council in the middle of this year, what's kind of the time period that you anticipate that businesses and others would have to in order to adopt and implement the policy themselves? I have several other comments, so maybe we could go one by one. Yeah, unless you want me to go through all of them first.
I'll just answer the question quick, and then we can hear the rest of your comments. So it could be. It's been proposed to be 6 months. It could be 9 months. I think we're open to options. Initially, I want to say it was 6 months, or it could also be written to say something like January 1st, 2022. And if the policy passes at the end of April, say, for example, that would give a good 8 months, maybe something like that, 9-8 months. So those are the options. But if you have a recommendation, we'd also be happy to hear.
Thank you for the clarification. I also saw 6 months on the draft policy that was on the agenda today. I don't have a recommendation on time to compliance yet, because I know that there are a lot of moving pieces that I think we're still fine-tuning. My next comment or question is really on how this policy could be further clarified or refined in order to support small local businesses. And I think that could probably touch on, or that's probably related to environmental justice component you are all talking about. So if Mariana or anyone else could shed more light on your thinking, that would be really helpful.
Can you just clarify? So you're looking specifically for more detail on how to support small businesses?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mariana, I'll give you an opportunity to respond first if you'd like.
So are you asking like more on top of what we have already mentioned, or just more detail on what we have already mentioned?
So I know that part of what we're discussing here is on how to incorporate environmental justice into the policy. And I apologize if I missed anything critical that's already part of the draft policy, but I didn't see anything. So I wanted to see if you could elaborate on that. And I guess I have a mental connection between small businesses, for example, business owned by communities of color, or people who are or owners who are on the lower income bracket, and how the policy could affect them. But that's not necessarily doesn't necessarily equate to environmental justice. So I'd love to hear more about your thinking on environmental justice first.
Yeah, of course. So what we wanted to do when it came to environmental justice is just really recognize that the connection there when it comes to the plastic pollution problem to environmental justice. So in the beginning of the ordinance, we kind of spell out, what the problem is, what the issues are with single-use plastic. You might hear my little coworkers in the back right there. And also when it comes to the connection, right? So plastic being a byproduct of petroleum, and knowing that the petrochemical industry and the waste that it creates is disproportionately harming Black, Indigenous, and Latinx and other communities of color and low-income communities. So kind of spelling that out, and, you know, really kind of showcasing that this problem goes beyond a litter problem, and it goes beyond you know, harming our environment. It's also harming those environmental justice communities.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Mariana. Yeah, I think she did a great job of explaining it. I don't have much to add, but I just want to clarify if you're looking at it. So, you know, right now it's sort of identified in the series of whereas statements at the beginning. But if you're looking for something that's more like tangibly supportive or differently supportive of small or businesses of color that are owned by people of color, let me know, because I think we can put our heads together and be sort of creative. If there is a grant program, you know, maybe we can look at how the grant program is structured to provide additional support for communities of color, or there might be other options in there. Laura, I saw your hand, and then Mariana, I saw your hand again.
So Chelsea's comments reminded me that something I had forgotten to mention. I definitely want to advocate for that we should work towards securing funding to provide a grant program. And just as you were mentioning now, Lacey, structuring that grant program in a way that promotes equity and equitable distribution of resources and supports locally owned businesses, and then otherwise focusing on particular demographic groups for the allocation of those resources would be worth considering.
Thanks, Laura. Mariana.
Yeah, I was going to add something similar to that, but also, you know, thinking in how we can best support our community. It's also thinking about language justice. And when we're communicating this to the many business owners, making sure that we have that available in different languages is another way that we can be supportive. So I know that's in our mind, and on top of making sure that funding is equitable.
That's a good point, I think, both for the policy itself and the implementation of the policy, and also for the grants, right? So if we are fortunate to get the funding, to get the grants, then we want to make sure that we're communicating in the languages of the people who would be needing them and wanting them. Any other thoughts from other commissioners?
This is a very helpful conversation. Thank you for bringing up equity, Laura. You know, I think that's really where I'm going, is to make sure that however we implement this policy, if it's passed, then it's really done in a way that's supportive of our local small businesses. I can see an instance, you know, in some of the variety shops on Fremont, and where the shop owners are selling balloons, and you know, from their perspective, how would the policy implement would affect their bottom line, especially given, you know, businesses have seen such ups and downs in revenue over the time of COVID. So just want to give an example of kind of what motivates me to want to encourage us to think more about not just providing, you know, a few $100s to get people started, but also ways to support or relax some of these policies even for these businesses in particular.
Yes, I think that's a really good point. You know, some of the variety stores that sell a lot of different things, including balloons. I don't know that balloons would be as impacted as maybe styrofoam, right? So if they're selling styrofoam cups, plates, bowls, that would be a loss, right? That would be a potential lost revenue. Balloons, it's just more of an education, right? So if you sell the balloons, you have to provide some information about how they can damage the environment and how to responsibly use them after you buy them. I guess that could potentially turn somebody off from buying them, but hopefully not. But that's a good point, Chelsea. And if when we get to the point of developing some of the language, I'd be happy to have you take a look at potential ways to incorporate that.
Great. Thank you for the clarification. I would love to collaborate with the subcommittee on that topic.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna keep going and share my screen again. So the other thing I wanted to raise was when we were first working on this, we sort of had this complementary policy that we were working on, and this was a much smaller change to an existing ordinance, which was sort of known as the litter ordinance or the solid waste ordinance. It updates the language, but it also would require businesses or property managers to collect litter from sidewalks and street fronts at least one time each business day. And in conversations with some of the community members, I think that, there might be some challenge around the perception that businesses are the problem with litter, when we all know that, yes, they sell it, but other people buy it and then walk out of the store and throw it down. There's a whole lot of things that go into litter, but I see this as a very important sort of opposite side of the coin, if you will, in addressing single-use plastics. You can limit it all you want, but if we're thinking about how to beautify and take care of our community, litter has its own set of negative impacts on the community. And so the question that I have for this commission is, do we want to, and we don't have to necessarily answer this right now, we can do it later, but I'd like to hear from you and what your thoughts are on bringing this policy change forward in addition to the plastics policy. So they'd sort of be presented at the same time. They could be separated and voted on separately by council, but we would bring them forward for them to consider at the same time.
I think this is a fine thing to bring forward, especially because it may actually incentivize businesses to think about the litter that's going out their doors, because they're responsible for cleaning it up. I like the idea of phrasing it in a way that definitely makes it clear this is just to say who's responsible for cleaning up a space, because we've just got a tragedy of the commons situation where some of these public spaces, no one feels responsible for cleaning it up. And so even if you weren't the one who threw it on the ground, you think, oh, it's gross, I'm not going to pick up someone else's trash. So if we just declare who is responsible for it, then we no longer have that somebody else's problem issue. And if anything, business would benefit from their space looking clean, because somebody might be more inclined to visit a place that's clean and inviting as opposed to has trash and seems uncared for.
Yeah. Yeah. And just a couple of comments. I think, we already have some businesses that are doing this in and out. I know they have folks that walk around and clean up that area probably more than once a day, at least once a shift, I would guess. And then one thing to consider is I was talking to our green waste outreach coordinator for the city of Seaside, and she saying one of the challenges with something like this is that in an area like, say, right where the Buffalo Wild Wings and Chase Bank and the grocery outlet are, that parking lot is shared by a multitude of different businesses, right? They have one garbage enclosure and materials enclosure. And so it would probably, that's why we incorporated the language of property managers. And so working with the property managers to say, okay, for that shared parking space, how are we going to divvy it up? Is it just that the property manager has somebody who does it? Is it that the different businesses sort of take different sections of the parking lot? So those sorts of things might need to be navigated a bit. Sorry, I sort of jumped in. Are there any other comments or thoughts from commission members?
This would pertain to all businesses in the city of Seaside, or only restaurants? Correct. To all businesses.
All businesses.
Mm. Mm. I think it makes sense, as you know, regarding the property manager consideration. It makes sense if the responsibility is initially placed with the property owner, essentially, and that any business that may be leasing that property and operating on that property, then the responsibility may be transferred to them through arrangement with the property manager or property owner. That might be a way to address that.
Yeah, I agree, Laura, that that just kind of both the optics and the operations of asking businesses that are already having a really hard time to do this additional thing, although it does make sense that that we're asking them to chip in a way that hopefully will benefit everybody, including their business. And yet it could come across as just kind of piling on for businesses that might be short-staffed already. So the other thing that comes to mind is shared parking lots for strip malls. So areas like, you know, the corner of Fremont, where Harumi Sushi and Bon Thai and Papachevo's all are, you know, parking lots like that, or over where Noodle Bar and that whole strip of businesses are. You know, I don't know that every leasee would consider the parking lot theirs. So what Laura's saying just makes a lot of sense, that it becomes a conversation between the property owner and the tenant, and the property owner should carry some of the responsibility, even if that person is not present. I also think the property owner is more likely to follow through. In a sense, enforce is a little too strong of a word. I hope it would just be more like dialogue with the tenants when it appears that litter is becoming a bit unwieldy. I don't think we really have the compliance staff that would be able to effectively enforce that if it was just on businesses and on the city. So yeah, just echoing the strength of Laura's suggestion.
Yeah, I think the remark about tragedy of the commons is also a good one, you know, and Kira's comment about not having anybody who can, you know, we don't have the staff to enforce this ordinance, but if it does get out of control, then there's clear direction on whose responsibility it is, right? Instead of saying the city saying it's the business and the business saying, oh, the city doesn't sweep the streets enough, or, you know, and so it just provides some clearer direction. So I want to keep things moving. That was my last slide on this portion, and what like to do is open it up for public comment. And then following public comment, I'd just like to vote on sort of each of the options on incorporating language around use your own, environmental justice, and food service delivery charges. And they can be broken up separate, but that will give our subcommittee some direction on how to start, or if to start, incorporating some additional language and revisions. So keep that in mind, commission members. And now I would love to open it up to the public if there's anybody here that would like to speak on this item. Yes, I see Jason and then Timothy.
Thank you, Chair. Timothy is ex officio. I thought he was part of the commission, maybe, but my misunderstanding.
Not quite yet.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep, he will be by our next meeting.
Okay, great. Good to know. I'm sorry if I'm going to do this disclaimer again. Like, I know you're not all a bunch of idiots, but I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for the council. And just a little bit of a background, I don't know, kind of legal stuff. I can give you my opinion on legislative issues. If it was development issues, quasi-judicial, I would have to kind of withhold my opinion until all the evidence was in. So that said, I'm still listening to all of you, and I'm taking all that evidence, even on this legislative decision here. But I want to tell you where I'm leaning, and generally speaking, move this forward, move both the litter abatement for businesses forward, in my opinion, because we regulate businesses. Yeah, we don't regulate people, individuals so much, but we regulate business and property owners. So I think that's well within the, what the city can do to try and clean up the city. So I kind of like that idea, like where you guys are going with this. And then as far as the plastics ordinance, I know COVID threw a big monkey wrench into everything, but we're resilient people as a whole. And I think we can just learn to deal with what life throws at us and continue to move forward. And I consider the plastics ordinance a moving forward. And I really appreciated what Mariana said as far as the environmental justice, social justice point, that plastics and the petroleum industry inflicts upon people. So I support what you're doing. The linkage to the fee, the delivery fee is right now, I haven't wrapped my head around it. So I'll let you guys think about that a little more and come up with it. But I'm supportive, and and listening to what you guys come up with. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason, for the disclaimer and the comments. Appreciate it. Timothy.
Hi, thanks for the acknowledgement again. I think this is all really amazing to be talking about. I really kind of want to echo what Commissioner 2 was talking about with supporting businesses through this transition, because I feel that, I do agree with enhancing customer responsibility. I think that is a really big portion of the burden that happens with this. And I do believe that people mostly want to do the right thing and they want to recycle, and they just don't know how, right? So I think that this commission has an opportunity to really use the partnerships for implementation to really amp up the education aspect of how this transition will go, with resources for the public, resources for businesses on what it looks like to be sustainable, what it looks like to enhance that customer responsibility. So I would urge to support that part of this request as much as possible, because again, people do want to do the right thing, they just don't know necessarily how to do it, or maybe they haven't been educated about what it means to be sustainable. I believe that the delivery service surcharge for like Uber Eats is really important as well. And I think that will benefit the environmental justice concerns and equity, because if we're going to be limiting businesses, we should also be trying to lend a hand to them. And this is a way that we can do that fiscally. So I think that's really important to add in the rhetoric with this ordinance. The last thing was about, oh yeah, for the litter ordinance, I think that's also really important. And the only concern I have is to have some sort of follow-up on the dialogue between property owners and the businesses, because if property owners or managers aren't receptive, then where does it go down from there? Can businesses intervene anyway? And what does that look like? Because personally, I would think to target businesses to be responsible for the litter ordinance, just because they're actually the entities that are there and seeing the litter. And I feel that that would really incentivize their procurement practices.
Thank you. Carolyn, I see your hand. You're muted.
Thanks. Carolyn Hinman. I am a resident of Seaside, and I also work for Green Waste Recovery. I work with different cities, but I just wanted to speak to kind of the customer responsibility of the thing. Also, I think there are lots of pieces of legislation in California that are still moving forward in the waste industry, regardless of COVID. And like Timothy was speaking to the education, a lot of people want to do the right thing, but don't necessarily maybe know how. I think this is just a good time to keep rolling it forward. AB 827 is one that puts the responsibility on the customer. Also, we're requiring business owners to put 2 and 3 stream stations available to customers with signage. So all of this kind of dovetails together. And I think it does more of a service to have more points kind of going in the same direction, when this is the way kind of the state is going anyway. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Carolyn, for your comments and baby comments. Both enjoyed hearing both of them. Any other public comment? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands or hearing any, so I'll bring it back to the commission. This isn't necessarily, I don't know, a formal like thing to vote on, but it might be easier if we do. So if there's a motion, we can break these up into 3 separate pieces. There's the use your own language, and that's sort of customer responsibility. There's the environmental justice, and then there's the food service piece. Oh, did you have another comment, Timothy?
I have a question. I have the packet for today's session, but I don't see anything that looks like environmental justice language. And the section that I was interpreting as the use your own language may not in fact be everything we're talking about here. Is there somewhere else I can make sure that I'm not missing the text that I'm voting on?
No, you're not voting on text right now. You're voting on giving direction to the subcommittee to sort of develop the text of these things.
Then I withdraw my question. Yes, let's.
Okay. Timothy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have an additional public comment if that's okay.
Sure.
I'll just make it really quick. I just wanted to urge the commission to also incorporate rhetoric or statistics about like how much money businesses can save in the long run with sustainable practices, because I feel that most businesses are going to view this as being, fiscally a burden to them, which may be the result short term. But I would just urge to find more rhetoric about, what it's going to look like in the long run for them and how that's going to help them fiscally. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Okay, oh, Chelsea, did you have a question or a comment? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I realized I didn't finish my long list from earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, take it away.
We're talking about at the same time. I just wanted to see if there are actually any legal barriers to bringing your own ware for takeout, or if we don't know the answer to that at this moment. That could be, I guess, a threshold question for developing that language if we do approve for that research and language development to move forward. And then the second is it's more of a clarification. Yeah, so I'm looking at the current draft that's posted on our agenda as well for the plastic policy, and I wanted to just make sure that I understand 8.60.012 on customer responsibility. And so are we referring to the customer responsibility of where no retail establishment or other provider shall provide single-use products, as in single-use plastic products? This might just be a language clarification item.
Well, so luckily I have responses for both of your questions. One, I wouldn't, for the purposes of this meeting, I think the link that was sent and put in the agenda was by accident. So we had just started to sort of think about some language, and I realized we just didn't have time before the meeting. And so those are sort of internal. I wouldn't hang my hat on any of the language that is in there right now. So the commission or the subcommittee will be going back and revising what is in there. And then like the comments that Mariana posted, those were in a Google Doc, and I have been having problems with Google, so those aren't in there yet. There were just some technical problems. So don't take that as the language that is going to be developed. It's just a starting point. If you do have comments around that language that would help to frame it, or suggestions, feel free to send me those in an email, and I'll share them with the other subcommittee members. And so we'll revise that language. We'll get a draft together that would have the revisions if the commission gives the direction to make those revisions, and then we'll share all that language back in a better way. So you'll be able to see it in its more complete draft for what will probably be a special meeting in the coming month or so. And then the first question, I did talk to Environmental Health and Safety from the county and asked them a couple of questions, and one of which was, are people still allowed to bring their own? Because the state had passed some rules and regulations. Actually, they provided guidance to restaurants and businesses on how to accept reusable containers and still meet health code requirements. And all of those are still in place. Businesses aren't obligated to accept reusable containers, so it's up to their discretion. If they do choose to accept them, then they would need to follow the procedures that were outlined by the State Department of Health. A lot of businesses aren't accepting them now because of COVID, even though it would still be safe to do so. I mean, there were diseases in our world before COVID, and so these were developed to ensure that any transmissible disease is not an issue when people bring in their reusable containers. So yes, it's still legal, it's still possible, but most businesses aren't doing it right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the questions and clarification. So I'll entertain any motions if any commissioners have motions at this moment. Just a reminder, the three options that we've been discussing is the use your own option and developing language around that, environmental justice language, and then how to incorporate food service delivery charge, if that's part of this policy, or if we just maybe recommend that the council do a policy like that, and have them be mutually supportive.
If I am doing this right, I'd like to motion that the subcommittee on our preferred plastic packaging ordinance add language for and investigate, including, we'll start with the using your own option.
Yes, Kristin, you're doing this right. Do you want a motion for all of them at once, or would you like to, are you motioning for them separately?
I'm happy to motion for all of them at once if, since probably everyone will be on board with that. So yes, let's motion for the subcommittee to consider and include language on environmental justice, the use your own option, and whether we can include a delivery surcharge cap in this ordinance.
Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor of giving this direction to the subcommittee?
We do a roll
Aye.
call vote? Aye.
Yeah, we can do a roll call vote. Chelsea.
Aye.
Kristin made the motion. Mariana.
Aye.
Kira.
Aye.
Laura.
Aye.
I also vote in favor. All right, with that direction, the subcommittee will move forward, and we will have recommendations for the commission to review within a month. And we will work with our staff liaison, Beth, to set up a special meeting to review the suggestions. Sorry, I accidentally muted myself. Okay. Moving on. Where are we on the agenda? I have to get back to my screen.
Climate action planning, 7C.
Climate action planning. Okay, thank you. So I just have some updates, maybe. Want to keep the commission sort of abreast of what's happening internally or within the city, as well as regionally. I've had a couple of conversations with Ashley Polson, who's the county's sustainability coordinator. The county is in the process of updating their climate action plan, as you all know from our previous presentation a couple of months ago. Where they are in their development right now, they had an RFP that went out. It closed on February 18th. The scope development period, which will likely be March, will probably be the time in which, if there is to be any coordination with jurisdiction climate action plans, sort of working and piggybacking, I guess, on some of the work of the county, when that would be negotiated and discussed. There are 3 areas that we think would be the most feasible to collaborate with the county on. One is doing a detailed inventory, which we could possibly get from AMBAG. AMBAG already does some greenhouse gas inventory work for local jurisdictions. I haven't seen the most recent version. I would like to. Beth, I don't know if you can request that from AMBAG, but
Yeah, I have a meeting on, I think tomorrow, with their rep to talk about that.
Great. Yeah, so if they, whatever they have, I don't know if, for an added fee, if we're able to get a more detailed inventory that could then inform our climate action plan. The other pieces for the county would be stakeholder engagement. So if they have a stakeholder engagement process, it would be great to engage with that, as well as reduction strategies. So let's say the county sort of develops a series of potential GHG reduction strategies. That would be for the county, but a lot of them might apply for the city and might have different impacts. So let's say strategy A would reduce greenhouse gas emissions for the county by, I don't know, 70 metric tons. I don't know. But the impacts if the city implemented that same reduction strategy might have a different impact fiscally, environmentally, and otherwise. And so if we are able to sort of take that initial list and then work with those same consultants to apply them to the city, that might be a potential sort of cost saving option. So I was trying to get a little bit of a ballpark figure around what this might cost for the city, because I would like to put this in our budget request. And she indicated around 30 to 40,000. That might depend a little bit on what AMBAG could provide. And then the other key component is staff time. So, we could get the money, but if we don't have staff to support, that would be really tough. And the staff have time allocated to dedicate to this. It would be really hard to make any forward progress. So I don't want to lose the opportunity of partnering with the county, because there's a lot of cost savings there. So I'd like to stay sort of in communication with them if possible. The other thing that I wanted to mention about this that I think is maybe just a little bit of a learning curve is understanding the difference between a sustainability plan and a climate action plan, as well as what CEQA requirements might be. I'm not a CEQA expert, but I know there are local jurisdictions within the state that have CEQA approved climate action plans, and that provides a lot of benefits, especially for the development community. So that might be something to do, but that's not, I don't think, within the purview of our group. That would be something that council would need to decide. Sustainability plan, I think, is obviously much broader than a climate action plan. And so getting direction from council on what they would prefer we focus on. So, a sustainability plan might be climate or greenhouse gas emission reduction strategies. It might not have as much technical information, but then it would also have things, other policies that might support habitat or might support water. It would just be much broader than a climate action plan, which would be focused specifically on greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So that's something that I think would be beneficial to sort of inform council on what the difference between those is, and then what they would like to focus on. So that's all I had for that. I don't know if anybody has any comments or questions for me. It's more of an update. All right. I don't see any from the commissioners. Are there any public comments on this item? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on. Work plan. Beth, I think you were going to discuss this a bit. I don't know if you have slides you want to share.
I have some slides of the annual work plan itself, but that was also included in the agenda. We approved and went over this annual work plan months ago. Council didn't get around to approving it because of COVID. So it's less about potentially changing what we have in there, because we still don't know the direction of the council and how those goals will affect our group. I think everything that's in there is still what we're focused on and moving forward and working to achieve. So the main point of discussion here would be whether or not we want to incorporate some additional items in there. One thing that comes to my mind just based on tonight's discussion is even including past budget and spending information, like how we spent budget and achieved the pollinator plantings and the Bee City USA designation, and kind of linking up the money spent to the goals achieved, and how we're making requests for potentially more budget for the plastic ordinance outreach elements, and speaking to how that could help out. Other than that, I'm open to other suggestions as well as input on that idea in terms of adding a new section to our annual work plan.
Thanks, Beth. I'll open it up for commission comments. I feel like we just did this. So to me, it feels very much like we already have our working groups and we're sort of moving forward quite well. I wouldn't be opposed to Beth's suggestion, especially in light of the fact that we'll probably be making bigger requests for budget to council this year. For me, if anything significant were to change, it would be dependent upon better understanding council's priorities. But I'll stop there. I'll open it up to the rest of the commission to comment first. Unless they have none.
I think that when I look at it, I see that it's identified, in our general duties to identify the strategic environmental goals for the city. And so there's the flexibility there in terms of detailed responsibilities and our current year work plan. Yeah, I agree. We just did this and we're already into it. And as far as I am concerned, I think we have our hands full. But there's still the flexibility in our general duties here to continue to stay engaged with what's happening with the city's goals and moving forward. So I don't think that we need to formalize changes at this point.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay. Any other thoughts from commissioners? I don't see any. I'll open it up to the public. Are there any comments on this item? Yeah, Jason, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, your work plan looks great, and it is quite a few things. I just want to, I know I mentioned this years ago, and unfortunately this is still coming up. It's our general plan update. It has been long delayed. Why exactly? It's not clear to me. However, the general plan update does have some environmental consequences, and when the next draft is provided to the council, I would really appreciate it if either individually or as a commission you take a look at it. So I just want to bring that up, that's still on the radar, and and it, according to our goals, it's coming at the council's goals. It should be coming up soon.
Right. That's good to hear. I've been wondering about it. Okay. Any other public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on. We moved item E down to reports from commissioners, so we'll move on to item F. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. This is a request I'd like to make to the commission to spend some of our budget. We have about $500 left in our budget. Let me just, sorry. So as I alluded to when we were going through the plastics item, we would like to do some outreach to businesses to encourage them to sort of stop giving out this plastic stuff immediately, whether or not there's council action. So these are some examples of some posters that we made. They're only I'm showing you them in English right now, but they would be available in both English and Spanish. And if businesses requested them in a different language, we'd obviously support that and print them in another language as well. The idea is that this pink one would be on the door, maybe a similar sign that's about half that size might be by the register. And then the dark blue one would be in the back of the house, sort of a last minute stop. Don't put these items in. I priced them out just online at Kinko's, and making 75 copies in color would be about $350 on FSC paper. So I just wanted to request that that we allocate some funds to printing and then distributing these to businesses. The other option that is also a completely viable option is that we just wait until we get direction from council and incorporate this cost into whatever our budget request would be for implementing the policy. The only thing I'll say is keep in mind, if we do get these printed, it'll be, I'll need the support of the commission to distribute them. So.
I'm only slightly surprised at the printing costs, but I think they're useful and I would like them to be printed, and I'd be happy to help distribute them.
Yeah, I can shop around for cheaper options. This was just doing sort of an online walkthrough, far enough to get to the checkout, but not to actually purchase.
If it helps, I can check Costco's printing services. They've been pretty helpful for me previously.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's some local printers too that I'd like to ask. That's
so
also
your
an
interest
option.
In being able to print these, to secure funding from the commission to print these in advance of the council direction would be essentially a community service to provide this as a suggestion from the commission to businesses to utilize these materials?
Yep. It would be sort of an act that could be much more immediate to sort of stem the flow of plastic utensils that are being distributed. And it'd be sort of
Just
a first step
reminder.
to changing that. Yeah, Beth, go ahead.
Yeah, just a reminder, the past couple of quarters or semesters, I can't recall, that we've had CSUMB service learners that were kind of trying to work on this. So we were going to have some type of similar information out had COVID not happened and had things been a little bit more productive in working online.
Yeah.
I would suggest, particularly where space allows, right? So that you have the font size that you're looking for, but if you are able to at least co-print an English and Spanish version, and then as you mentioned, if businesses request additional language to provide a follow-up support, additional printing, but to reduce printing costs by printing the same message in those two most common languages in our community, might make sense instead of having two separate ones. But in general, I support action and moving forward sooner than later. And I don't believe that we have a lot of competition for existing and remaining commission funds. So I support your proposal.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I just wanted to comment on your first thought. Yes, ideally, we had probably, gosh, four or more versions that we received from CSUMB students, and just none of them really were what we were looking for. So I tried doing these on Canvas, and I am not a graphic design person. So somebody who has any more ability than me, I would gladly wholeheartedly accept the support of another commission member to take a stab at designing these in a way that would allow us to fit both languages on and still keep the impact of the statement. So if anybody, don't all volunteer right now at once, but you can email me or Beth if you have those skills and would like to apply them. Any other thoughts or comments from commission members? Thoughts from the public comments? Okay, I saw Jason and then Timothy.
Yes, Chair, thanks. Just, I don't want to get into wordsmithing, but just my gut feeling is the word no at the beginning is not something I'd want to have at the sitting on a, on the counter in a restaurant. Just my thought is, utensils, start with that question and then say, please ask, just a little more positivity to it. But just a thought. Thank you.
Yeah. Just to clarify that, so that blue one that says no utensils, condiments, that one would be behind the line. So as sort of the food is being prepared, that might be hung on top of the wall where the workers grabbing the bags and assembling everything. So that one is intended just for staff, and the pink one was the one that was intended for the public. So we're trying to sort of hit them at different angles. So yeah, just that, because I agree. Okay. I agree. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Timothy.
I don't know if this was already thought of, and this is kind of getting into the nitty gritty of implementing this, but I would suggest I would think that it would actually maybe be better to have a draft that is just in English and then a draft in Spanish or whatever language, just so the words are bigger and it's more impactful. But if we're going to do that, I think that it should be on a double-sided piece of paper instead of wasting 2 pieces of paper. But again, that's kind of getting into the nitty-gritty. But having like one side be Spanish and then the other side being English, per se.
Thanks. Okay, is there a motion on the request to allocate $350 of our budget to printing?
I'll move to allocate $350 of our budget to print these posters.
A second.
Do we need a roll call vote, Beth, or can we just do?
Roll call.
Okay. Chelsea.
Aye.
Kristin.
Aye.
Mariana.
Aye.
Laura.
Aye.
And Kira had made the motion. I think I don't know what the protocol is. Sorry. Kira.
Aye.
Aye. And I am also in favor of this. And so the motion carries unanimously. We will move on. The next item is G, request an environmental commission member to attend the next neighborhood improvement commission meeting. Beth, do you want to speak to this?
Do I? What do we need
I don't know.
to potentially request from the NIC in terms of money for any of the upcoming projects that we want to continue as outlined on our annual work plan? As a reminder, the NIC is kind of holds on to some of the cannabis money that's received by the city from taxes, and they give a recommendation to council on how that money should be spent for improving the community, and we're doing that in a handful of ways. So if we think it's necessary at this time, or if somebody wants to link up with me and we can talk about more details and come up with a more detailed ask of them, I'm looking for somebody to go along with me to their meeting and we can get placed on their agenda for consideration of that.
Thanks, Beth. Are there any volunteers?
I would like to know when the meeting is.
I have to get back to you on that. And if you can't attend the meeting, I can attend on the behalf of the EC. But I definitely need collaboration on what we might be asking for in terms of funding.
Okay, Beth, well, do you want to discuss right now what we would be asking for in terms of funding, or?
More parks improvement stuff comes to mind. I know Diane Nielsen of the Parks and Recs Commission went to them and received, I think she's kind of finalizing getting approval of the money for her tree planting project, which some of which will happen in conjunction with the pollinator habitats we've done. whether or not we want more signage related to that. My brain is just kind of stuck on that item right now. But if there's anything else on the annual work plan that we want some cash directed at, let that be it. Otherwise, maybe people can look over it and send me an email about some of the ideas you have if nobody wants to step up right now, and that's fine.
Okay. Can I make a suggestion that you email out when the next meeting will occur? And folks can respond both with if they'd be able to attend, as well as items they might identify for potential funding.
Sure.
Remember previously we had discussed also the Havana Solids Park and supporting the work that was being done there.
Right. I'll do that.
Okay, thanks, Beth. The next item is reports from commissioners. Are there any commissioners that have reports or any subcommittee members?
Hi, I'm happy to give an update on the Habitat Subcommittee work that's been happening. In particular, I've been in ongoing communication and liaising with Sustainable Seaside, the Parks and Rec Commission, and Friends of Seaside Parks Association. So I can report out a little bit about what's happening with those groups. As Beth already mentioned, Parks and Rec has secured funding from Neighborhood Improvement for the tree project, and I've consulted with Diane about what types of native trees she's interested in placing, and she is also consulting with the other interested community groups about where they might go. Sustainable Seaside is, as far as their pollinator outreach, pollinator program, they have funding remaining from their fundraising event the prior year, and in this year they will continue to steward Lincoln Cunningham Park, which is one of our pollinator sites, but they really want to do education and outreach for their major activities this year around pollinators. I've been invited to present to a group of students, I think it's next Saturday, from the International School at Lincoln Cunningham Park, discussing pollinators and the plants that are established there. FOSSA had a planting event at Highland Otis and established new plants. They are interested in including signage about pollinator plantings at other parks, in addition to the 2 locations that we identified where we will put Bee City USA signs. They are interested in additional signage. So I think that there's collaborative opportunity there with Sustainable Seaside, but that might be an activity and a cost to that the Environmental Commission also can support, so that there's coordinated pollinator signage. I think that catches us up. Pollinator planting stewardship continues at all sites and it's time for weeding. So I'm gonna let that be as you go. Any place where you know there's a pollinator planting and you see weeds growing, please, by all means, help yourself, pitch in, jump in.
I just took a walk up to our plantings right before this meeting, and I had to uncover quite a few because I think somebody may have gone through and swept the sidewalk, maybe with like a big roller or something, because a lot of them were buried under dirt and wood chips. So I had to give them a little bit of love and space. But yeah, I was very grateful for the recent rain. Hope we get some more. Thanks, Laura. Any other updates from commissioners or reports from commissioners? Okay. I had one that I just sort of moved from above the business item on electrification. I just wanted to let you all know that I reached out to council members about integrating electrification into the campus town development. It's not integrated right now from what I can gather. There might be some pieces about encouraging residents that live there or folks that end up leasing space. I don't know. I think it was incorporated in some respect, but it's not going to be, it will still be using natural gas. So it was a little bit disappointing to me. I feel like if we continue to have these larger developments move forward, that we should really be thinking forward about the type of energy that they use, because otherwise it's a huge missed opportunity, and it's sort of you know, it's like putting in a fax machine when people are you know, starting to text or something. It's just sort of, it'll become outdated technology. Or so anyway, Kristin, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I thank you for clarifying. I thought the electrification mandate was for the state, that it wasn't like a local choice. Am I thinking of something else? I thought new construction had to be all electric.
If it does, I don't know, but I would guess that maybe it went into effect at a certain date, and maybe the campus town development was far along enough in the process that it wouldn't be required to comply with any state requirement if there is a statewide electrification requirement. I only know of like Santa Cruz and one of the Bay Area communities passing ordinances regarding electrification.
I'll clarify it for myself then. Thank you. But I agree with you. That's disappointing. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Okay. Any reports from staff?
Just a quick one.
You're breaking up, Beth. Beth.
The habitats. But yeah, that it says I'm unstable.
Beth, you are unstable.
It says I'm unstable.
You are.
Okay.
You are
But the B City USA signs are up.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Well, that's great. I'll take a look at those. Wait, that's great. Way to end us on a wonderful positive note. That is the end of our meeting. I thank you all for sticking through a long agenda. Really appreciate all the work and engagement, and look forward to continuing. Keep your eyes open in your email for future information around a special meeting to discuss changes to the plastics policy and moving that forward to council. So have a wonderful evening. Thank you for taking time away from your families to be with us today, both the commissioners and the public. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, Lacey. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
See you next time.